here. Okay, we're going to put a little hello into the box down here. I'm going to pull up some links that we can hook you all up with. Beth, do you have that link document from last time as well?
I think so. Let me see if I can pull it up.
I got to see if I can find that here myself. So for those of you that are here, give us a shout out. And Ian, hello. I see that, you gave me a really hearty hi there in all caps. So you're either really angry at me or you just wanted me to shout back at you. So hello, Ian. And Beth, I'll try to find that myself here, Beth. Oh, good. Tell us where y'all are from, by the way. Tell us where y'all are from. We're thrilled that you're here to hang out with us. Let's see. Awesome. Indiana. Indiana's awfully close to Cincinnati, and I love Cincinnati in northern Kentucky. So someday, hopefully, we'll get some property there. California, Elijah from California, Wisconsin, Virginia, California, Antarctica. Whew, all right. That's pretty cool. Ha ha ha. Did anyone just come here? Oh my goodness. Was there an AP Live that the College Board put on? I had no idea.
To be fair, I think ours was scheduled first.
I agree. And we are the unofficial.
Yes, very unofficial.
I'm not cool enough to do the AP Lives this year because when they let me do it last year, what ended up actually happening was when I sent my first set of slides through, they went through and they edited them all, but they didn't fully put the markers on. They did. I didn't notice where the different markers were, so I had typos on my first set through, and how embarrassing on the live, and I had to admit that. And I'm an English teacher; I'm not supposed to have typos, but I'm only human. And oh man, just terrible. Oh, someone had an argument essay today and totally flopped. Please note that you didn't flop, but even if you did flop today, we can work on talking about some of those argument questions because we're going to start with argument, then we're going to shift to synthesis and whatnot. By the way, if there are any teachers in here, are there any teachers in here? If so, just toss it in the chat. Say, yeah, I'm a teacher. Do we have?
It looks like Ms. Eckert got a shout out. Hope I said that right.
Ms. Eckert fan club. I want to meet this Ms. Eckert now. Fan clubs and everything. This is great. Wow. Okay. Wow. Ms. Eckert is. It's probably a long E sound. It's probably Ms. Eckert, and we're just saying it wrong because
we're saying it wrong. Yes, there will be a recording.
Yeah, always. That's always our question. Yes, this automatically records. If there are any teachers in here that have some AP experience, a lot of times, the coach and I don't get to all the questions or, questions come up that we've already answered and things like that. If you're willing to kind of monitor the chat for moments like that and really help us out, we really, really appreciate that a lot. So that's good. Ms. Jacobs, it seems like you got in, which is good. I think that we were just having a conversation about trying to get in. So if you're the same person, that's awesome. And I think Ms. Cody was a Ms. Cody from last time as well. So it seems as though there are some people here that are coming through. Kim, please consider helping us out in the comments. If you see anything that gets repeated, that'd be awesome. Cause you did put in that you were a teacher, and we love help for that. Jerry, I can't say why you can't hear anything. I think that almost everybody else can hear things. I'd encourage you to turn up the volume on your computer. That might be what needs to happen. What I'm going to do here, folks, is this. Coach, why don't you introduce yourself, even though I think that a lot of people know who both you and I are. But why don't you introduce yourself? And while you do that, I'm going to drop some resources like YouTube channels and stuff in the chat where kids can access us directly outside of just talking to us right here. So, Coach, take it away.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you everyone for coming, and we hope that this is going to be really informative for you. My name is Beth Hall. I am an AP Lang teacher from Arkansas, and I have a YouTube channel and a TikTok called Coach Hall Writes. So if you haven't checked that out, I would love it if you would subscribe over on YouTube. And also check out TikTok because that content is kind of like micro content. It's much shorter and it's a little bit easier if you're trying to cram or just get quick tips as well. So yeah. And then if you guys haven't already realized this is our second session and it will be recorded. We will put it up on our respective YouTube channels, but we're also doing one more session the night before the exam. So it's going to be Monday night, May 9th. So if you want to get some last minute questions answered that night, or if you want to cram with us, that is going to be a session very similar to this where we will answer any questions you have. So don't
Yeah,
forget.
but that wouldn't be our free for all. That'll be the let's cover
Yes.
everything. Yeah. Absolutely. Sorry, Beth. And also, you have an argument workshop coming up pretty soon that I could drop in the chat here too. That's also free, correct?
Yes, that is going to be, it's actually on my birthday, which is April 26th. It was like the one night I could get childcare and I had nothing else scheduled. So if you want to celebrate my birthday
on my birthday, I'm just going to, let kids come in and bombard me with argument questions. That's pretty awesome. I put the link in there as well for Coach Hall's Light Hall workshop on writing argument essays. And you actually just did a rhetorical analysis one too that I'm sure probably went pretty well. Yeah.
Yeah, that one was really fun. And the recording of that is up on my YouTube channel as well. So just like this one, it's totally free. You just register through Light Hall. And those are more of like a workshop style. So it's less of a Q&A. We save that for the end. It's more of like a lesson where you kind of go through some of the more advanced tips and stuff. So if people are interested in that, definitely sign up because it's just another opportunity to help you prepare.
Awesome. And then Good. So in the chat here, I have put a link to Coach Hall's YouTube channel, a link to my YouTube channel. One of the things I want you all to just understand is that when you all subscribe, that actually helps us out because what happens is that allows when kids search for AP stuff, it allows our videos to kind of like get pushed up. So even if you don't press the bell, that's okay. But just having the subscription there actually increases our numbers so that the algorithm in YouTube will allow us to get our videos out there more to help more kids. So I don't know about you, Beth, but for my analytics, about 80% of my viewership is not subscribed. So we've got about almost 8,500 subscribers, which I know that you're right around there too. Excuse me, I'm drinking some seltzer here, so I will be burping a little bit, I think. But if you could do that, that would be awesome. That really helps us out, and that's like the freest thing that you can do. One other thing that I'm going to do in here just real quick is for those of you that want some extensive review, the Guard of English does have an ultimate review packet, and you can sign up for it for free for Unit 1, that is. And that's right in there right now because we have about 3 or 4 weeks left to exam day. And if you're like, I need some extensive review, there's stuff in there. But with all that said, let's actually get people what they need, Beth. So let's talk about argument. We can review a little bit from last time, but we're going to try to see if we can't push it forward. And also for you students that are paying attention and are listening live, toss in your questions about argument. I know I already saw someone that was like, I'm pretty sure I flopped my argument today. That's okay. But tell us about your questions for argument. And Beth, tell us about your kids and what they struggle with. I'll tell you about mine. And then we'll talk about things that we can do. Okay?
Sure. So right now, we're actually really focusing on specific evidence in my class for argument because I had a couple students say something like, I know I have a lot of ideas, but when it's a cold read, like I've never seen the prompt before, I don't really know what to write about. So we're working through that, kind of doing like a little exercise where they come up with a database where they're kind of keeping track of different things that they could write about knowledgeably and effectively. So I think that's crucial, is just realizing that you need to have specific evidence, but also realizing that between your current AP Lang class and other classes you've taken and your personal experiences, you have a lot to draw from. So we just want to make sure that you can write about it specifically. That's like the biggest thing we're focusing on right now, because I think my students feel pressure. Like they've asked me, like, can I write about Disney, or can I make it up? So we're dealing with a lot of those questions right now.
Yeah, and I think that the specifically is really, really key. So one thing that can really help an argument is when you all think of examples, do not write about them in broad terms. Okay. Let me give you an example, and I can't even believe that this happened. Let me make this very clear. Last year, there was an argument prompt that had something to do, and I can't remember the ins and outs of it, but it had something to do with generosity. Okay. And someone actually wrote about the Garden of English. So when somebody grabbed that essay, of course, it was forwarded to my desk, and they were like, you got to be kidding me. Because Coach Hall, if I remember correctly, I'm pretty sure you were in it too. I can't remember entirely, but I feel like it was talking about our review sessions from last year. And when that happened, the kid only wrote, take the Garden of English, for example, who just helps kids with their studying for their AP exams. That is not specific, folks. Okay. That's like, I'm glad that you mentioned the Garden of English, or, the kid mentioned Coach Hall, but what we want you, when you're describing this, to be like, take, for example, the Garden of English and Coach Hall, who give up their own time, even on their birthdays, to consider helping kids study for their AP English exams. On top of that, they're giving up time at night away from their families, which, we know that they have, if anybody follows us on social media. And now we're talking about the giving up and the sacrificing of their own time and assisting kids as they study. Look at all those nice verbs in there. That is how you write the best evidence in your argument essay, by really focusing on your verbs. So that's something that I really want to reiterate, and I think that's the easiest way to take the coach's advice and make it applicable is what words can you put in that can be the most precise. And what's really good about this too is that our conversation tonight, when we talk about argument, a lot of it will fit with synthesis as well, because synthesis is an argument paper just with sources. But anyway, Beth, other things you want to think about before I toss out some of the questions that are here?
Well, as you were talking, I was kind of thinking about something that I've been emphasizing with my students as well, and that is that each Q3 prompt, so each argument prompt is going to have some sort of like keyword in it. So it could be the value of, and then like insert topic here, or argue your position about this topic, whatever they give you. And we really want to make sure that you're connecting back to the prompt, because I see a lot of times where students write a piece of evidence and they know how it proves their claim, but they don't actually have the commentary there. So, like we did one last week in my class about grit. It was from AP Classroom. And so when my students and I were planning our essays and talking about it, we were just brainstorming like different people or events or things like that. And so I had them tell me, okay, how does this actually demonstrate grit? And they had to be really specific, because if you don't actually connect it for your reader, even if you think it's obvious, you still want to put it on the paper, because we're not supposed to infer. Like, we can't just say, oh, I think they understood the prompt. We have to go by what's on the paper. So always make sure that you are explicitly connecting your evidence to your thesis, which should be based on the prompt. And I know that sounds really obvious, but so many times I've seen it where kids haven't made all those connections. And someone did ask about that. They asked about line of reasoning. So that might be a good segue to that question, perhaps, because your evidence and commentary are a part of your line of reasoning.
So just so you know, I haven't done this yet, but tonight, for the first time ever, I will actually give commentary steps. So I haven't made my argument video for it yet, or my commentary video for synthesis, or my new one. I have an older one. But my new one is going to have commentary steps like I did with my last rhetorical analysis one, like the perfect commentary for rhetorical analysis. So tonight for y'all, in a couple minutes, I will reveal my commentary steps to actually help out with that. So Beth, let's actually look at the first question that I have up here. So we will talk about commentary. We already talked about being specific, which I think is the hardest thing for kids. They create hypothetical examples, or if they use examples that are real, they just kind of write them out in like one sentence with a broad paintbrush. It's be specific. I tell my students that they have to, when they provide an example in an argument paper, they have to describe it in a minimum of 3 sentences and a maximum of 5. So that means that they're going to have a topic sentence, a minimum of 3 sentences. So this is for a body paragraph, that is. So they'll, for one body paragraph, a topic sentence. They will then have their example described in a minimum of 3 sentences, and then their commentary is going to have to follow the words that I'll show you in just a few minutes for commentary. Okay. But Beth, the first question that we have here is this. Excuse me. Someone asked about structuring the argument essay, or collecting the his or her ideas for the argument essay. Now, I have a way that I do this that I actually have a document for that I could share my screen with in just a moment. But before I do, how would you answer that? How do you collect your ideas for an argument essay, and then how do you structure it so that you can avoid from going off on a rant?
So that's a good question. I know a lot of us teachers use an acronym to help students brainstorm evidence. I use CHORES. I know that you use S-cubed. Yep. And I've seen students do 2 approaches, and another teacher described it to me as like inductive versus deductive. But I've seen students sometimes brainstorm evidence and then work backwards to their thesis and kind of say, okay, based on these examples, this is what I want to argue. Or some students do it the opposite way. They're like, okay, this is what I want to argue. Here's my evidence for it. But I think that the key is to start with like a good acronym. And it doesn't really matter which one you use, because they all sort of get you to the same place. But also on test day, I tell my students, so I use CHORES, which is current events, history, outside knowledge, reading, experience, and science. And there's other acronyms too. I tell them that they don't have to list something for every category on test day. Most of my students dislike the reading one. Like if they could skip a letter, they would skip R. But we want to have some ideas of different types of evidence too. So you can write about personal experience, but maybe we want a historical example somewhere in your essay. We don't want to just only write about one thing, if possible, or we want to look for those relationships between the evidence too. Sometimes a strong paragraph might have more than one example that proves the point. So I think the first step to structuring it is to come up with a method, some kind of acronym that works for you. And also think about, does it make more sense for me to plan my evidence and then create the thesis from that, or do it thesis to evidence? Because I've honestly had students do it both ways and it's been successful. I think it's just kind of like one of those things where it's how your brain works.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That was just my thought on it.
Not a problem. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to talk too much. But Beth, I'm glad that you know me enough where you're just like, yeah, that's just Tim's MO, So I do appreciate that. Let me do this here. We're going to share this up. We'll see if we can't get this to, there we go. Awesome. So basically, when it comes to an argument prompt, this one comes from 2016. Please note the copyright is here. This is the College Board's, but it's publicly released, and this is a free session. So please note, folks, that we've got this here. When it comes to an argument prompt, what I do with my students to get them to think about, and Coach, while I'm talking about this, can you actually put what chores stands for in the,
yes.
Thank you. Awesome. This right here is a prompt, and I always have my students break down prompts, and I have them do them a little bit more thoroughly than this, but and I've got videos about that. But for the quickest way to break down a prompt, what I like to do is I like to get my students to look for the vocab that shows up in the prompt, because a lot of times there's some sort of vocab word in there that's going to be a little bit hard, but I promise you that there will always be context clues that allow you to know that vocab word. I know that a few years ago, there was one that had the word artifice in it. There was one that once had the word impunity in it. There was one that had the word conquered in it. And these all might be words you're like, I have no idea what that means, but trust me, there's always context clues in the prompt. So I ask my students to recognize any vocab and just put it here as they begin to plan their essay. I then ask them to read through and think about any ideas that this prompt might bring out. And then this is the part that's most important for planning the essay for me when I teach my students, and that is creating a conquer question. And the reason why I call it a conquer question is so that the kids can know that answering this question will allow them to conquer their essay. And all they really have to do is, and this is the part that I want to just go over, there's other part, find the vocab, find ideas, but this part is the most important, is to just look at the prompt itself. And you always want to find, when it comes to the argument prompt, the word argue in the prompt. And it will say something like, argue your position on, and then it says, the extent to which Wilde's claims are valid. Now, I didn't read this whole prompt, so I'm going to for just a moment. But then I'm going to show you the question that I'm going to create. Because when you do this, and then you pair it with thinking about evidence, like with some sort of acronym, you're going to be able to get your thoughts together very, very quickly. So here we go. It says, in 1891, Irish author Oscar Wilde observed disobedience in the eyes of anyone who has read history as man's original virtue. It is through disobedience that progress has been made, through disobedience and through rebellion. So Oscar Wilde said that. And it says, Wilde claims that disobedience is a valuable human trait and it promotes social progress. Write an essay that argues your position on the extent to which Wilde's claims are valid. Okay. So now what's going to happen here is my students are going to go to this word argues, and they're going to go to the end of the sentence, which is just to the word valid, and they're going to create a question that begins with the word what, or maybe more than one question. And it has to start with the word what, or it has to start with to what extent. So if I go through here and I'm like, okay, what do I have to actually argue? And that is, all right, I need to figure out what Wilde's claims are. And so I have, okay, what are his claims? What are his claims? Luckily, I have the sentence that comes up right before, and that is that disobedience is a valuable human trait and that it promotes social progress. And now I have to think of another question. To what extent are Wild's claims valid? So now I have this question. To what extent are Wild's claims, I can spell, valid? There we go. So if I create these two questions, folks, in order for me to know that I'm going to write a really good thesis, I need to answer both of these questions. I need to make sure his claims are articulated in my thesis, and I need to also make sure that I have in some way articulated to what extent, 0% to 100%, I think his claims are valid. And one of the best ways for me to figure out to what extent I think they're valid is all I need to do is go to the ideas. What's a virtue? What's disobedience? What are some examples of disobedience? Is social progress tied to disobedience? Yeah, I think most of the time it is. Okay. And so now I'm like, good. So he's mostly correct there. But do I actually think that disobedience is virtuous? Absolutely not. And now I've got a cool little essay going there. Okay. All right. So somebody posted a question, I think, about this. It said, can I clarify what I mean by turn it into a question? This is the question you would answer in the thesis. Yep. No, that's right. So all I'm doing is taking the prompt, because the prompt is a claim. It's a statement. You need to argue your position on the extent to which Wild's claims are valid. And what I'm doing is I'm turning that statement into questions that I have to answer. When I answer those questions in my thesis, I know that I'm establishing a line of reasoning. I'm responding to the prompt, and I can outline my paper pretty well. Was I clear with that, Beth, or are you like, Tim, you got to clarify something because it didn't come through?
No, I think that was pretty clear. I think you answered the one question that people had about it. Okay.
Yeah. And someone asked if qualifications are better, or, qualifiers or concessions are better than all out yeses or nos. And the answer is absolutely not. Folks, you can write a darn excellent paper and only say 100% yes and 100% no. I've seen it happen all the time. I promise you that plenty of kids wrote this paper and they were like, for the, Wild is entirely right that social progress is tied to disobedience, so therefore it's virtuous for humans to engage in disobedient behavior. Yep, no problem. No problem at all. So when my kids are going to prep their paper and make sure that they're on task, because that was the other question, how do we make sure we don't go off on a rant? If your thesis answers these two questions, then that's going to guide your paper to actually answer those questions. No, so someone asked, should there not be any nuance in the paper? No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying you can have a paper with zero nuance and it can still be awesome. You can also have a paper with a lot of nuance and will still be awesome. I'll actually show you the thesis that I wrote in response to this prompt. You'll notice that there's plenty of nuance here. It says the majority of social progress made over time can be directly tied to behaviors that are perceptively disobedient. However, to suggest that disobedience is entirely virtuous, or man's original virtue, is a bit hyperbolic. What I've done here, folks, is my argument is, hey, disobedience can lead to social progress, but let's not pretend like that's always a good thing. That's where he's going a little too far. That's a very nuanced argument. But I might have another student who says the majority of social progress made over time can be tied to disobedient behavior. Therefore, disobedience is a virtue. Boom. Excellent paper as well. Not a problem at all. We'll talk about topic sentences and evidence in a little bit. Okay. I'm going to stop sharing here. What can I clarify for anything there, or what new questions do we have to answer, Beth?
So one student asked about if we, like, as far as like qualifying, I think we need to clarify that you don't want to equivocate, though. Like, you don't want to argue both sides evenly. Like, you don't want to necessarily take an exact middle ground, because I've seen it happen where a student argues in favor of something in one paragraph and against it in the next, and they almost like contradict themselves. So we want to be careful that we're not necessarily taking the exact middle ground necessarily. We do want to realize, though, that it's kind of like a spectrum. When we say to what extent, we want to avoid the absolutes if at all possible in most cases. So the always and the never. but you could be close to always, and there could be some exceptions, or you could be close to never, and there could be exceptions. But we want to be careful to stay away from those, because when I read an essay and I see that like something like disobedience is always helpful, I'm like, okay, but here's a time when it's not. And then you kind of lose credibility with the person reading your paper. So I know history teachers tell students this too for like DBQs and stuff, but we want to try to avoid phrasing like always and never, but also be careful not to take the exact middle ground, because I would be worried that your argument might get a little murky and it might be confusing what you're actually arguing.
I completely agree. And so a lot of times kids can, kind of make that swampy water. I agree. I completely agree. What other questions do we have in there? I'm going to try to find, someone's asking, I saw a question here that said, how can we write a good thesis for an argument essay? Coach, do you have an argument thesis video? I have an argument thesis video.
I do have one. I think I have a couple, but one of them is about writing a claim, and that one deals with thesis statements as well. So I can get that link and put it in the chat in a second. But I do want to answer one person's question. I think I'm understanding it correctly. They're asking, it sounds like they're asking, like, I think we're maybe a little confused about, do we keep it vague or do we put our line of reasoning in our thesis? So a line of reasoning.
I know what that means. Open or closed, right?
Open or closed thesis, yes. Okay, always. So here's the thing. A closed thesis is basically when you tell your main points in your thesis. And it's probably how you were taught to write a thesis statement the very first time you ever wrote one, probably in like second grade. An open thesis is more vague, and there's a whole range of stuff in between. So for the exam, it is a rough draft, and you're writing under duress, meaning you're writing in 40 minutes, you're stressed out, you've never seen it before. It's not supposed to be perfect. So it is okay to have a closed thesis. If you were writing a 20-page college paper, you wouldn't probably have a closed thesis because you couldn't spell out all your main points. But one tip for this, though, is that you don't want to give your exact evidence away in your thesis. So for instance, if you're writing about disobedience, and the examples you want to talk about are like, let's say, the American Revolution and the Civil Rights Movement, you don't want to necessarily mention those in your thesis, but you might talk about rebellion in terms of social progress, because both of those things have that in common. They led to some sort of social progress. So there is a little bit of being vague, I think, in your thesis. But you're still telling the main idea. But we don't want to spoil the whole essay by you telling us your exact evidence in your thesis, because then when you write your body paragraphs, it feels really redundant. So there's kind of a balance there.
Right. And actually, you know what, Beth? I'm going to share my screen again, and I'm going to actually show people exactly what you're talking about, because I actually have a thesis that gets a little more specific in my topic sentence and then gets very specific in my evidence. So I will highlight that for everybody right now. So, let me share my screen up here again, and what that kind of looks like. So this right here, folks, okay, I'm not equivocating in my argument. My argument is that civil disobedience can lead to social progress. But my argument is also that there's no way that, because I'm supposed to say to what extent are Wilde's claims valid. I do not think that disobedience is a virtue. At all, actually. And so because of that, well, I shouldn't say at all, but mostly. And so because of that, I have a nuanced paper here. I'm not equivocating. I'm actually saying, look, he's right to here, and then he's not right here. So my entire argument is he's mostly right. Okay. But what happens in the thesis, you're going to notice that here it says the majority of social progress made over time. Well, over time is just another way of saying history. So my line of reasoning is I'm going to give examples of social progress throughout history that prove that disobedient behavior has brought forth that progress. So I'm probably going to have 2 body paragraphs that do that. So you're going to notice that when I have social progress over time, in my first topic sentence, I'm going to now talk about Boston's history. So notice, Boston's history is ripe with examples of how disobedience can seemingly breed social progress. So I've got my social progress from over time, now to Boston's history, but I still haven't said what my example is going to be specifically. Watch this. For example, at the onset of the American Revolution, a group of colonists, feeling oppressed by taxation without representation, disguised themselves as natives and boarded a merchant boat in the Boston Harbor, destroying the product on board. Tea. Okay? And so you're going to notice here that what's going on is I went from history to Boston's history, and now I'm actually using the Boston Tea Party for my evidence. Now, I just wrote this quickly before you all came in, so that's why my evidence isn't drawn out a little bit longer than that. My students are required to write about three sentences for their evidence to be precise. But you'll notice here, I've got the feeling oppressed by this. They disguised themselves. I didn't just say dress up. I said they disguised. I said they boarded. I put they destroyed. Okay? So what's going on here is you're seeing this progression from a little bit broad in the thesis to a little bit more specific in our topic sentence to extremely specific as we describe our example here in our first body paragraph. Okay? So please note that's the nature of that. Beth, does that kind of model what you were talking about there?
Yes. I think it's really good to show how there's like a progression. You kind of build up to your evidence because you don't want to like give it away too soon in your thesis.
Yep. Someone actually asked for this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a link here for y'all. Let me put it in. We're going to make it so that y'all have to make a copy for yourself. But there we go. I'll put the link to this particular document right in the chat here for you. Okay. I appreciate you, Tio. Okay. So here we go. And by all means, call me Tim. Mr. Freitas is my father. All right. So there we go here. I'm going to show some commentary stuff in just a few minutes, but I want to make sure we address any of the other comments before we move on.
I think there's a couple that we can answer somewhat quickly. So I've seen it asked a few different times, but about like the counter argument, is that needed? The answer is no, but it can help the quality of your essay. I think if you're running out of time and you feel like you haven't fully developed your other points, you don't necessarily need a counterclaim and rebuttal or concession and refutation.
Right.
It can help with sophistication, but here's the thing. It's not guaranteed. So few students earn the sophistication point that I think both Tim and I agree that we want you to focus on your evidence and commentary as opposed to the sophistication point. Because honestly, there are times when students are working towards sophistication and they might not get the point, but it still helps their commentary. So it's good to know what to do to try to get it, but we don't want to just insert a counter argument simply because we're trying for that point, because I've seen it fall flat a lot. Like I've seen it be sort of like a one sentence counterclaim and rebuttal because the student was told they had to put it in there and it wasn't really doing much for the argument. So please don't think it's required. If you do want to include one, think about where you want it. Usually most essays that I've seen that have a counter argument have 3 body paragraphs. That's just an observation. It's not a rule. And most students address it in like the 3rd body paragraph, but I have seen some students address it in body paragraph 1 right away. It just kind of depends on their line of reasoning, but don't throw it in there just because you think you have to. There are also other ways to earn sophistication too. And I think that's important. Something that I noticed about Tim's example was that he had different types of advanced punctuation. So there was a dash, there was a colon, it had a good flow to it. So you could also work on your style as opposed to your counter argument. There's different ways to earn that point. So I think it's important to realize that the counterclaim is not mandatory.
Absolutely. And sometimes, I always tell my students, unless you can really, because the point of the counterclaim is to dismiss it. But my students if my students even write an although in their thesis statement, sometimes they don't even write a counterclaim paragraph. They just use it to kind of be like, hey, I recognize this is the case, but I'm going to argue this the whole way through. And that's something that they can do. Okay. What I want to do is this. Let me look at a couple of the elements here. Someone brought up the point that is true. You cannot get the sophistication point on any one of your essays and still get a 5 on your exam. There's no doubt about that. Scoring a 140 on your papers can can put you in position to get a 5 on the exam, whether you get the sophistication point or not. And let's see, I guess we could petition to remove the sophistication point. I don't know if that will really help. Someone wants to know, how can you not waste time when writing a timed essay? This is super important, right? And Beth, I think that you actually produced a video about this the other day, so I'll let you speak for yourself about, kind of ways to practice. But for me, I tell my students that when they practice at home to read an argument prompt and give themselves 12 minutes, write a thesis and 3 topic sentences for that prompt. So that means they only write 4 sentences in those 12 minutes. However, if their topic sentences are good, like I teach them, then that means that they've already done all of their thinking. So now they just need to describe their examples and then explain how their examples meet their argument in their topic sentence, which also then is fueled by their thesis. That's the easiest way to not waste time when it comes to timed writings. So you can learn how to outline your papers in 4 sentences and then off you go. You've already done all of the thinking. Now you just need to do the articulating. But Beth, what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think one of the things that students need to realize is that it helps to have a plan, but your outline doesn't have to be very detailed, but you do want to have something to go by because you don't want to just sit there and not know what to write. So an outline can be really helpful. Your intro does not have to be long. Honestly, I tell my students, worst case scenario, just write a defensible thesis. But if you can add a sentence or 2 before it to kind of ease into it, that's usually very helpful. Technically, something else that is worth knowing and could save a little bit of time is if you have to decide between finishing a body paragraph and writing a conclusion, usually you're going to want to finish that body paragraph because conclusions aren't mandatory. Now, can they be helpful? Yes. If you can restate your thesis, if you're worried it's not defensible the first time, that could be to your benefit. If you could situate the issue in a broader context and really think about why it matters to society or like short-term and long-term implications, that can be very helpful. But I've read plenty of essays that have scored a 140 or even a perfect 6 that had no conclusion because the body paragraphs were that good and the writing was that good. So those are not necessary either. So that's something. And the other thing I would say, and I mentioned this in a recent video that I did for my channel, is that if you're not doing timed writings in class, it is something that you can do on your own. You guys saw the prompt that Tim just showed. There's others on the College Board website. I think if you haven't written an essay in 40 minutes, then that would be something that I would practice over the next 3 weeks. Just practice the pacing, because I think that's the thing that every year my students tell me helps the most is the fact that we've done some timed writes. And I don't think there's a magic number of like how many to do, but if you haven't done one yet, definitely consider doing that because you don't want to get to exam day having never done it. It's kind of like if you play sports, you're going to scrimmage before you actually have a real game. So a timed write is kind of like equivalent to a scrimmage. You want to make sure that you're actually practicing in a simulated environment. So that can help too, because that helps students realize where they're wasting their time.
Yeah. Just real quick when it comes to the conclusions, because we want to make sure we can work through as much as we can. I just went to YouTube here. Okay. And, Beth and I are trying to give you as much information as we can in an hour. And that means we have to kind of gloss over a lot of things. And that's why we put our YouTube channels consistently in the chat here. Okay. And so I just did argument, conclusions, Garden of English. Okay. And then sure enough, look at that. Argument, conclusions that rock. An entire video. It takes you 12 minutes to get through it. That's one of my older videos, but it'll be redone hopefully by the summer. Synthesis conclusions that your readers will love. So these are steps, folks, for you to write conclusions for those of you that really want to do so. And I also have rhetorical analysis conclusions in here somewhere, but it is what it is. But if I do the same thing and I just go over to Coach Hall, right, sure enough, we're going to have improve your conclusion paragraphs, how to write a thesis for AP Lang question 3, things of that nature. So please note, folks, that that's why we put the YouTube channels in there a lot, is so that you can have access to videos that do this more thoroughly with some examples for you for that as well. Somebody asked here, what if you're writing an essay prompt that's asking for your opinion on something that you haven't really thought of before? There is a large chance that that's going to happen, folks, but that's the point of the exam. Can you think on your feet? And you might be like, oh, man, that really stinks because, I haven't really had to do that. But life, you have to do that. I mean, I have to think on my feet all the time. I've got 5 kids. I never know what the heck they're going to do. And so I'm always thinking on my feet, like, oh my word, what's going to happen the next time that one of my young children is licking rice off the knee of my other child. Like, that's gross. I got to now figure out how to deal with that. Kind of that kind of stuff.
Why do I feel like that happened?
Oh, of course it happens. And I know that you've lived that life too, and that you do.
Yes.
So nonetheless, my point here, folks, is that halfway through the paper, if you figure out what you really want to say, if you already have an argument, don't change course because you've already invested time. But if you realize that your argument like really sucks and you're like, you know what, I've got a good 20 minutes, you can get a thesis and a body paragraph out in 20 minutes if it's a good argument. At that point, you might want to be like, I'm going to cut my losses here and get that thesis and one really good body paragraph out, because that might still score a 130 if it's really good. It has the potential to, at least. So just something to think about there. Am I telling you to scrap everything? No. But sometimes that kind of stuff does just happen. And you can't really entirely plan for that. What you can do, though, is you can start creating like a evidence log for yourself. And I went over this last time where I showed this thing on my screen where I'm like, hey, listen, from now until test day, think about 2 meaningful things from society that you know about, from history that you know about, from books that you know about, and from stories from your friends. And then, Beth, I know in your most recent video about how to study for your AP Lang exam, you actually talked about creating that argument wallet on your own. And if you actually think about these things in general terms with the activities that Coach Hall and I have given you on test day, there's really not a chance that you will have not thought of something that prompt relates to. They do try to make accessible prompts for argument in particular. Sometimes synthesis is a little bit inaccessible because they want you to kind of educate yourself about something while you're reading, but that's not always the case. All right, Beth, before I talk about commentary, anything else to add here?
I'm just going to put the link to the Q3 thing that I gave my students. Well, actually, I haven't totally assigned it yet. It's coming later this week. Spoiler alert, in case my students are in here. But basically, it's just something that I'm having them do to try to prepare. Like, kind of like we all year have been talking about all these different ideas, different prompts, stuff like that. But now I want them to really focus on what they know best, and hopefully it'll be versatile enough. But, even if you don't know much about the topic, or someone asks, like, what if the prompt is really hard? Here's the thing. If it's challenging for you, it's going to be challenging for everybody. So I know there's that moment of panic as you're writing, but think back to the premise of the essay. Like Tim said, you need a thesis. You need at least 1 strong body paragraph, ideally 2. You need evidence and commentary. So it's kind of like those are the components of the recipe, and you just got to put it together. So we're not asking you to necessarily write this like award-winning essay. We just want you to put some thoughts on paper that argue a position. So I think that sometimes, someone said they need access to the doc. Okay, let me change the settings. I thought it was right. I think sometimes we overcomplicate the task, and we don't necessarily want to do that. We want to kind of like stay grounded in here's what I'm actually being asked to do, versus freaking out over it. And I agree with what you said about don't change course, because I've seen students have like an essay that was pretty decent, and then they'll cross out like a body paragraph and maybe their whole intro, and then they start over, and then they don't have enough time to really write what they need to write. And because of that, like they kind of lose the points that they could have had. Like it really wasn't as bad as they thought it was before they like jumped ship. So that's something too, is like, if you cross stuff out, it won't be graded regardless of which essay you're talking about. And yes, we read the stuff you squeeze into the margin. And if you put like a little star and draw an arrow or whatever, we read all that. But if you plan your essay in advance, you're less likely to try to scrap it halfway through. And so I would be really hesitant to just delete a whole essay or like scratch out a whole essay, because you can probably salvage it more than you think.
All right. Why don't we talk a little bit about commentary here? If you're cool with that. Are you cool with that?
Yes.
Okay. Body paragraph like a Bible.
I'm just trying to get an updated version of that link in the chat. I realized why it wasn't sending it to everybody.
All right. Good. So let's actually talk about argument commentary here. And please note, folks, that truth be told, everything that we're telling you about argument works with synthesis. You can even turn the synthesis prompt into a question. A synthesis prompt will say develop your position on instead of argue your position on. That's the only difference, okay? So you can outline it the same way. The only difference as well with synthesis, the second difference with synthesis is that you have to incorporate sources into your paper. And Coach and I will talk about that for the last kind of bit here. I'm assuming that you probably won't mind going to 9-10 like last time, will you, Coach?
No, that's fine.
Okay. But before we do, I have to make an ultimate review packet pitch again. Anyway, I want to share my screen here, and I want to talk about one way that you can really develop commentary. Now, Coach, what is your number one word to help kids develop commentary, by the way? Because your number one word is my number one word as well. What is that?
Is it because?
Oh, you bet. Okay. You bet.
That's like the go-to. I have a few other like actual verbs that I like students to use too, but because is like the go-to for all 3 essays. It sounds simple, but it works.
Yeah, every single time. And so because of that, what I did was I developed just a way for my students to know exactly what they should do every time they produce commentary. And so I did this for rhetorical analysis. I'll pull this up here. So Garden of English for rhetorical analysis. I got this video right here, and it says, hey, listen, if you use these particular words in this order in your commentary, you're going to develop some strong commentary the whole time. The words are not entirely the same. But they're close. So if this is my body paragraph for the civil disobedience essay, and I didn't write the whole paragraph, just so you know, okay? Because that's not what I was trying to do here for y'all. I just wanted to just give you an example, okay? Can I put the link to that video in the chat? Yeah, I can. Hold on one second. Let me put that here. All right. There we go. All right. That's the commentary video I just put in the chat there. But anyway, if I go back to here, when you provide commentary, what you must always do is go through these moves. Move number 1 is going to refer back to something that you said in your evidence. Notice here, the boarding of the merchant ship. Now I have to relate it to a claim that I made in my topic sentence. I'm talking about the fact that this is disobedient. Okay, boom. Is disobedient, so I'm linking it to my topic sentence. Because, folks, the first step of providing commentary in any argument paper that you write or synthesis paper is you have the word because in your first sentence. Okay? So because shows up in sentence number 1. After that, you start sentence number 2 with the word consequently. And that's going to force you to further explain your evidence. What is the consequence in relation to your argument based on what you said from your evidence before? And then your third sentence starts with the word therefore. And it creates, and then you'll tie it to whatever your argument is. And then you could put the word because or since or due to. Any of those words work really, really well. I might even have more of a commentary toolbox here. Yeah, I do. Let me look at some of the words here. I'll put these in that document for you all as well. Here we go. These are the types of words that you want to show up in your commentary. So they're all listed out for you in this document as well down at the bottom here for you all. But I kid you not, if your commentary has a because, then a consequently, then a therefore, and a since, boom, you're good. You can go straight in that order, and it will force you to provide the commentary that you need. And even if your commentary isn't as good, or it's not as thorough as you would like it on test day, what I can promise you is this. It's better than a lot of other students writing. So it might be a little bit strained, but these words force you to provide commentary instead of just making claims. A lot of times kids, when they do stuff, they say the boarding of the merchant ship is disobedient. Humans' rights are typically considered more valuable than personal property, so people should do this. Therefore, this is social progress. Those are all claims. So you have just evidence and then more claims. That's not how this works. But if you do because, consequently, therefore, boom, boom, boom. If you put it in that order, and the word because shows up in the middle of your first sentence, consequently starts your next sentence, and therefore starts your last sentence, you're going to be good to go. Okay? And I will make a video about this. I'm doing synthesis right now, but it's the same process, and that will be out before test time. I can guarantee it. I don't know how much before test time, but it will be out before test time. Coach, any questions about that, or any places that I need to clarify?
I think it's good. I'm just reading back in the chat. Someone wanted to know if you use the same style that you just mentioned, because we've been putting that in some comments about that in the chat. If you do that for 2 body paragraphs, would that lose sophistication? And my thought is no, because if you have nuanced commentary for your examples, it's totally fine. I'm assuming you would agree with that.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, folks, I will tell you straight up right now that you can have that repeated. If the commentary is thorough, that's not going to lose out on sophistication at all, because those are only 3 words. So I'm going to share my screen again here. I want you to just picture this, okay? Those are only 3 words in the midst of all of what shows up from your topic sentence to the end. And I didn't even finish my commentary here. So you're going to tell me that 3 words that show up in the same pattern are going to be that distracting, where someone's like, oh, this is too robotic? Not a chance. Also, if you have a good formula, good formulas can be sophisticated. That's why Castrol GTX is the best oil you can buy for your car. They've got a great sophisticated formula, but it's the same in every bottle. Yeah, but it's really, really good. So you can have elements of formulaic writing. Let me just put it this way, actually, to answer that question. Statistically speaking, I can template all of my students' rhetorical analysis essays, and they can write it like a machine every single time. And my kids, 4 out of 10 kids get the sophistication point. So that's a 40% sophistication point for rhetorical analysis. Last year, like less than 10% of kids got the sophistication point for anything. And I'm at 40% with my kids that can boom, 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 because the formula itself is good. So I don't want to, I sound like a pretentious jerk because I am one. But my point is 3 words is not enough to remove that sophistication point from you. If the commentary is detailed, that's actually going to produce sophisticated commentary, and it's going to be something that we love. Especially, I love that kind of stuff as a reader.
Well, and all those words have a synonym too. So if you use therefore in one paragraph, you could use thus in the next paragraph. So you just need something that has that function.
Right, and that's why I put the other words at the bottom there. Absolutely. Sorry for interrupting you there, Beth.
That's fine.
All right. I'm going to put that link back in the chat, and you can make a new copy so that you can have those words on it. So we'll put a copy there because somebody brought that up. And Beth, like I said, I do apologize for cutting you off there. But the synonyms are there as well. And I think that somebody just said that stuff like this won't fly in college. Well, that's really weird because I finished grad school with a 4.0, and I finished undergrad with a 3.914. And all of my writing templates come from the papers that I wrote in college. So maybe it won't fly in college, but I don't know. It did in my grad program and my undergrad program. So.
I mean, I teach a concurrent credit class that's not AP, and if my students write that kind of essay, they still get an A. So I guess it just depends on which classes you're talking about.
Oh, gotcha. Oh, so someone was saying I was like, no, I think it will, So I just threw someone under the bus, accidentally. Oops. So, all right, please forgive me. That's how you know I'm authentically sorry. I asked for forgiveness there. So anyway, that's some commentary advice. There is some, there are some videos like that. All right, Coach, let's talk about synthesis then, because synthesis is just like argument, but with sources. What do we got going on with synthesis? What do we have for our best tips here? And folks, just so y'all know, we'll probably stay on until about 9:10 for y'all. So just a heads up with that.
So I think we might have mentioned this last time, but I think one of the big tips that really helps students is understanding the purpose of a synthesis, that it's a conversation of sources. So we don't want you to summarize the sources. You do have to tell us a little bit of the evidence, yes, but your job is to hopefully use at least 3 sources to support your argument. And so a lot of times it really helps if students have 2 different sources in a body paragraph. Now that's a recommendation. It's not a rule. I've seen exceptions to it but like normally if we have, 1 source per body paragraph or 3 body paragraphs, it feels disconnected. It doesn't have as strong of a line of reasoning. So we want to look at our sources and figure out which sources are talking to each other. Is it because they have similarities? Is it cause and effect? Is it because they could be used as a counterclaim and rebuttal? So we want to look for those relationships between the sources, because that's what synthesis is. It's working in all those different parts to form your argument. So I think that's the best thing. And just like with argument, the word because works in synthesis as well. Something else that helps my students, and this applies for argument and synthesis, is having stronger verbs. So I call them commentary verbs, but instead of saying shows, you could say illustrates, highlights, maybe suggests, demonstrates. There's a whole list of them, but those can help your commentary too. Because remember, commentary is the why. So whether you're saying this illustrates, or if you're saying because, we really want you to get to the why. Why does it matter?
Right. Absolutely. And so that's where, another thing too, and this is actually something in relation to sophistication for kids that are ready to do that. So folks, if you're not already writing 140s, don't go for the sophistication point right now. Let's try to get to the 140 first. But for those of you that can consistently write a 140, but you can't get to that one part, with synthesis, one of the easiest ways to really show something pretty awesome is that when you provide your commentary, take out snippets of your own words and put in 3 to 5 words from a source. So then sources aren't just evidence for your paragraphs, but they also show up in your commentary a little bit. That'll be part of the commentary video I do for synthesis probably in about 2 weeks. So I will have examples of that. I have examples of that in my old synthesis body paragraph video, but those videos are a little bit more boring. I'm not going to lie, but now you know. And so anyway, I do apologize for going off on a little bit of a tangent there. But yeah, the integrating source part here, it's definitely important to have more than one source per paragraph, especially because in order to score a 1-2-0, you have to have at least 3 sources in your paper. So if I write a thesis in one body paragraph and I only put one source in that first body paragraph, and that's all I can get done in time, the highest I can score on that paper is a 1-1-0. Even if the body paragraph is awesome, even if that thesis is awesome. So we need to figure out, how do we get 3 sources in at least that amount of time if I know I'm running out of time? And one of the ways is to say, how can I set up a way for different sources to kind of converse with one another? I do have some templates for that. I'll try to put those in the Google Doc that I already have up. Oh, someone asked a good question. 3 sources in the whole essay or 3 sources in each body paragraph?
Whole essay.
Yeah, whole essay on that one for sure. There's no doubt about that. Let's see. Any other questions in here about synthesis? How should you write your introduction? You know what, Coach, I'm going to let you deal with the introduction part for a minute, because I'm going to try to see if I can get some templates for integrating synthesis quotes. If you're cool with that. Are you cool with that?
Yeah, sure.
All right.
So I think I might have a video on this. I'll see if I can link it up in a second and link it. But there's, first of all, the most important part of your intro is your thesis, because it's kind of like the promise that you make to your reader. It sets up your line of reasoning. So worst case scenario, you have your thesis, but some students like to develop it a little bit more. So one way to do this is to kind of look at what the prompt has actually told you, because they will kind of tell you both sides of the argument. So some people think this, whereas others think this. I've seen a lot of students kind of use that as their lead-in, which kind of is a little bit better than just having a thesis, but it's not necessarily nuanced. You can situate the issue in a broader context. So especially if it's something that you can connect with personally, like they've asked about cursive handwriting, they've asked about libraries. So if you could think about, hey, why does this issue actually matter in society, or why might people debate this? Then that could be your broader context. Now, sometimes that actually happens in the conclusion as well. Sometimes students write the whole essay and then it's the conclusion where they're like, oh, here's why it matters. Now that can be a little trickier for prompts where you're like, I don't know what this is. Like if anyone's done the eminent domain prompt, I like to give my students that one, because it's like something that they have 0 reference point for before we actually do it. So that's a good one to practice if you haven't done it and you're like, what if I get asked about a topic I don't know? I think it was from 2018. It might have been 2017, But anyway, it's a topic that people are sometimes unfamiliar with. But you can read the sources to figure out here's what it means and here's why there's a discussion too. The College Board, I think, does a pretty fair job of making sure you have all the info that you need. But that would be one way to develop your intro, is to kind of look at the broader context or possibly both sides. But then you have to clearly assert your position. So you want to make sure that what you intend to argue is clear, because if you just show both sides of it, but you don't ever take your position, it makes your essay very confusing.
Yeah. And, Leo, for my advice in relation to the intro paragraph, I have my students just write a thesis for their intro. My students still get sophistication points. So I tell them, don't waste your time on an intro besides your thesis. Spend that extra time that you're not putting into a body paragraph on a really strong conclusion. Mm-hmm. And somebody asked a good question. What's a good ratio between commentary and evidence? Okay, so two sources per paragraph, I think is pretty wise. And then I tell my students that they have to have at least as many lines of commentary as they do of evidence integration. However, because I can give my kids that kind of format of because, consequently, therefore, my students, they will easily match the ratio of evidence to commentary. Commentary needs to be equal, if not more. Okay.
Yeah, definitely aim for more if you can. Because the commentary is what we're really looking for. So yeah, you need evidence. You need to reference the three sources, but you got to remember that for all your essays, commentary is your analysis. It's your unique insight. And so that's the stuff that we really care about, not what the sources say. Like, yeah, you need evidence to support your claim, but the commentary is what's going to really improve your score.
Somebody asked about a commentary outline for synthesis. Brianna, it's the same thing as it is for argument, but please know that I have to do a topic, sentence, and evidence video for synthesis, and then I'm going to do my commentary video. So that'll probably be out within the next 2 to 2.5 weeks. But it's the same thing. Because, consequently, therefore. That's the argument commentary. That's the synthesis commentary format that can get what you need out of that. Okay. I want to just share my screen again. I know that I'm going on and off screen here, which is fine. But I'm sorry for those of you that are like, oh, again. I did just put in some templates for integrating sources for you all. So if you're like, hey, how do I best integrate sources in my paragraphs? I do have some ways to do this, and I have some examples that are in here. And I do talk about not using the absolute words. I think you can use some qualifiers there. So instead of saying like it always is this way, it might be like it seems like it's always this way. Okay. So on that document, I'll share the link again. But what happens here is done. And I just got to press copy here. That copy. Control A, Control C, and we'll toss that in there for you all. Okay. So those are some templates that can help you with integrating your sources there. Okay. Good. Other questions that have shown up in here.
Well, we've got a little reunion going on in the chat, so I don't know what's going on there. But someone asked, would we lose points using evidence going against the point we are trying to prove? If it can prove our point but is being used for the other sides, can we still use it?
Beth, I don't know if I understood that question.
Well, I think if you're using it to set up a counterclaim, it would be okay. I have seen where students kind of cherry pick their evidence a little bit, where they kind of use a small fragment of something and it's not truly what the real quote was saying. So you want to be careful not to misrepresent something. But if you're arguing, let's say, in favor of something, and there's a source that goes against it, you can set up a counterclaim and rebuttal or a concession and refutation. So you could use that to say, some people think this, and while that's true, because what we really need to focus on is this, and that way you steer them toward your argument. So you can look for contrast as well, but you ultimately want to make sure that what you're trying to prove is very clear. So hopefully I understood that question correctly.
All right. And if if there's any need for clarification, we're happy to take that here.
So we're also getting some questions about rhetorical analysis, which we have done a session on that. So we're happy to like recommend videos from our channels for you and stuff like that. We're just trying to focus more on argument and synthesis for this particular session. But if you can't find stuff in our videos, we also have that session coming up the night before the exam. That's a free for all as well. So if there's specific rhetorical analysis requests, let me know. And while Tim's talking, I can kind of pull some of our videos that might help, but we are trying to focus on arguments. We're not trying to ignore the RA questions, but we are trying to focus on the other essays this time.
Yeah. And so a question here says, should you address a counterclaim in a synthesis essay? I know that a lot of times students want us to be able to say, yes, do this, no, do that. And I think that especially like from what I know from AP US and AP World and my friends that do stuff over there, there's a lot of it's like you have to do, yes, do this, yes, do this, yes, do this, and you're good, right? That's not necessarily the case with AP Lang, folks. What you need to do is you need to write a good paper. And that good paper can have no concession at all. There might even be concessions that exist, but that's not what we're looking at. We're looking at, do you have an argument? Is your argument well supported? So you do not have to address a counterclaim. Now, if you have a teacher that says, hey, address a counterclaim, that's fine and do it in class. But on test day, know that you don't necessarily have to do that. Excuse me. On test day, you can very easily just write an argument without a counterclaim, support it the whole way through, and do just fine on that paper. I tell my students all the time, if I have a prompt that says, develop your position on whether college is worth the cost, I might have a kid that writes a thesis that says college is not worth the cost, period. That's the kid's intro paragraph. College is not worth the cost. Okay. And then topic sentence 1, college is way too expensive for the average person. Okay. Topic sentence 2 shows up and it says college not only wastes people's money in terms of expense, but it also drives them even into even more debt and offers less success. Okay, that's topic sentence 2. That kid is arguing just one thing the whole time. If the evidence is there and the commentary and the evidence is there, that essay can score a 140. It's not going to score a 141, that I can guarantee. But it could score a 140. Doesn't sound too incredible, but if the argument's solid, we're good to go. Oh, here's a question that's a good one, Beth. I have an answer for this, and I'll actually put a video link in the chat for this. I made a video about this just like 3 weeks ago. But Beth, anything about reading sources quickly?
I had just responded in the chat that this isn't what I recommend for everybody, but in like a really dire situation, if you're pressed for time, you can skim like the first and last paragraph and look at those topic sentences because those are the claims. And that will tell you kind of like the skeleton of the source to tell you, hey, I need to look at this more closely. It relates to my argument, or no, this one I don't need. And if you decide I don't need to use this source, then move on. Because you only need 3. I recommend 4 if you can try for 4 just in case you somehow forget one or something. But if you know you're not going to use it, then move on. And also if you are really pressed for time, sometimes skimming and just looking at the source to figure out what the argument is, that can at least help you make an executive decision. Do I have to read it more closely? And also I think for my students, I try to have them annotate sparingly and meaningfully because, I think the annotations, at least the way I teach it, are a little bit different for synthesis than maybe RA. Like we're just looking for what's the main idea here and looking for evidence that we could use. So I have them annotate a little bit less than what I would if it was not timed, at least. In time situations, I think my students annotate a little bit less, just what I've noticed anyway.
So I put a video in that I made about 3 weeks ago about how to read sources quickly. And I actually encourage my kids to do the intro paragraph, topic sentences, conclusions to figure out if they want to then read, like which 3 do they want to read more thoroughly, so that they have an experience with all the information and they pick the ones that they can read more thoroughly. Here's a good question though. And this will probably be the last one that we take. And that is it better to paraphrase or directly quote evidence from the sources? What do you think about that, Beth?
Well, Okay, here's the thing. I think it depends because we don't want to see long quotes. So a lot of times if it's a really long quote, you could paraphrase it. But I like to see at least one quote per paragraph. And I don't know why. I don't know if it's just because I'm drawn to the quotation marks or what, but like sometimes when there are 0 direct quotes in a paragraph, it feels too much like summary, even if there are citations. But I think if there is a direct quote, then students definitely remember the citation. So I don't know. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer, but I like to see at least one example of a quote per paragraph, and also like embedded quote. So we don't want to just stick a quote in there. We want to choose something shorter that we can weave into a sentence of our own, because that usually reads better too.
So this is one of those things that actually is a preference depending on your teacher. And so I have a reader who is a co-author on the textbook Ideas and Argument. Her name is Mary Joselle. She's a good friend of mine. And she tells her kids to only paraphrase and summarize, because she's like, why spend time copying down a quote when you only have 40 minutes? I'm like, that's good advice. The reason why I make my kids quote only instead of paraphrasing or summarizing, unless they're describing the visual, because that's how you actually put that in the paper. You describe the visual because you can't put the actual chart in the paper, is because I think that when kids can seamlessly integrate snippets of quotes into their own writing, it appears sophisticated. And so I tell my students to do it that way. And someone just asked how you use a cartoon or graph as evidence. You just describe it. So you use it as an example, but you describe what the picture looks like, and then you provide your commentary on that. Somebody also told me that I should dye my hair blue. Just so you all know, when I was in high school, my hair was typically more blue than blonde at most times, or it was pink, or it was purple, or something like that. So now y'all know that's the case. Someone just said no way. I think I actually probably have a picture of it up in my desk in the front of my classroom, to be honest with you. And my students say pics or no proof all the time. I once met Steve Carell at a TGI Fridays, and they were like, pics or it didn't happen. And I pulled the picture up from my desk, and they were like, oh my gosh, no way. Yeah, there we go. See, proof or
it didn't happen.
Yeah, there we go. Listen, I will go get a picture of that in 1 second. In 1 second, if I can find it. I think I know where it is. But here's the deal, okay? Coach Hall and I, we ask that you subscribe to our YouTube channels. Coach Hall is doing a free argument essay writing workshop. Please go to that. I'm going to put the link to that in the piece right now. Okay, sorry, in the chat. You can sign up for that, where you can actually ask questions about commentary, argument writing, and generation. Also, for those of you that are looking for an extensive review, for like a really extensive review that gives you practice questions, practice tests, practice scoring guides, student samples, guided notes to go through videos and whatnot, here is a review packet the Garden of English created. I encourage you to check that out. There's only a few more weeks until test day. That is a huge, valuable source for you as well. So you can check that out. The link is in the description there. Beth, if you want to wrap up with any comments, I'm going to see if I can go get a picture of me with blue hair, because apparently proof or it didn't happen. So
all right.
Give me 1 sec.
I hope he finds one. I think that would be funny. So I'm just trying to double check the chat and see if there's anything we missed. So someone said if the graphic is included with a percentage of a, can we use that? Yes. And the comic can also be a source. You just have to talk about what it represents. So less about like the actual image, but more about like the deeper meaning behind the cartoon, like what the artist is trying to say, for sure. Let's see. I think we got all the questions. If you have any last minute questions about argument or synthesis, or if you want us to point like in a direction of something, we can. Someone said, okay, last word on line of reasoning. Okay, yes. So line of reasoning is a logical order. And so your line of reasoning comes from your thesis statement. That's kind of like your central argument. And then your paragraphs have to each have a main idea. So there has to be a claim that you're trying to prove. And these claims are based off of your thesis. And then within your paragraph, you need evidence and commentary. So those are all the components that you need. But the line of reasoning, we want it to be logical. You want to make sure that you are thoroughly connecting back to your thesis and to the prompt. So don't assume that the person reading your essay knows what you're talking about. Sometimes students have to be very explicit, like this demonstrates, let's say, the benefits of cursive writing because. Sometimes it really helps if you actually tie it back to the prompt. We don't want to lose sight of what the prompt is. And that's why we also said earlier to tie it to a question, because sometimes it's easier to think of a prompt as answering a question, not just like a statement. Also, one of the things that Tim showed you in his handouts that is helpful with line of reasoning is transition words. So I know it might seem kind of basic, but words like therefore or subsequently, consequently, trying to think of some others off the top of my head. But those can help you transition within your paragraphs and also between your paragraphs. And something else for the topic sentences, I know I talk about this in some videos, but we want to try to avoid sentences that say like one reason is. We want to try to make our claim stronger than that. And for our second body paragraph, if we can create some kind of overlap, that can help our line of reasoning as well. So those are just some quick tips about line of reasoning because we didn't totally get to address that, but really focus on, am I proving my argument? Am I answering the prompt? And am I transitioning effectively? Because that's going to help as well.
So unfortunately, I could not find said picture of blue hair. I will try to for our next session, which is the night before the exam. And so what is that, May 9th or May 10th?
May 9th, yes.
May 9th, yeah. Okay.
If you find it,
someone just said false statistics. Oh man. So no picture, it didn't happen. I will try to see if I can find one for the next time around. And you know what I do have in my desk though? I do have my picture of me with Steve Carell. But that's not a picture of me with blue hair because I was in college by that point. But now you know. Okay. I really thought I had one in my desk, and apparently I don't. Because my students used to ask me for that pictures of that all the time, so I used to just have one in my desk. But it is true. It is true. Anyway,
someone said post it to your YouTube. I think if you find it, you need to post it to your Instagram so we can.
Oh, that's a good idea. I should put it on Instagram. That's a good idea. I will. We'll put that on the gram if I find it. And that will be good. So, all right, Beth, I really appreciate you. I appreciate everybody that showed up and hung out here for a while. Please make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube. Check out all the other sources that we gave you, and we'll see you. We'll see you around. Oh, and while people are signing off, I will answer that last question that just came in. Should you say in source A, B, C, or D, or in source 1? I encourage my students not to do that. And on the document that I provided for today with just some examples at the very bottom, it says how to integrate textual evidence. There are templates there that will tell you how to do it the best way for you, instead of just saying, oh no, that's the wrong link I just put in there. Oops. Let's try that. Here we go. All right. Yeah, that's the one. Okay. And you can find that down there. So Beth, I appreciate you. The video will be posted on both channels. We don't get access to the video until at minimum tomorrow though. So it's going to take a couple days to get up. So thank you all. Thank you, Beth. And we'll see you around. Oh, don't forget to sign up for Beth's argument session 2 on her birthday so you can celebrate her birthday with her.
Thank you, everybody.
All right. Have a great one, folks. All right, we'll stop recording here.